Hello and welcome to the first video in a planned series about the Old Nordic theological system. Today, the start of that series, we're going to start at the beginning, or at least as close to the beginning as we can. In the beginning, for the Old Nords, much like the Christians, there was nothing. The Old Nords called this nothing the Ginnen and Gigap. The gap part of that means about the same as it does for us today, and it also implies that it was between something, and it was. It was between Niflheim to the north, which was the land of ice, frost, and shadow, and Muspelheim to the south, which was the land of fire, smoke, lava, heat, basically. These two realms encroached upon each other naturally. And when they met in Ginnen and Gigap, the fire melted the ice, and from these droplets was formed the first being, Ymir. He was a Jotun, which translates to giant, but it doesn't really capture it. As a Jotun, one of his powers was that he made more of himself asexually while he slept. He produced many more of himself per day. They reproduced extraordinarily rapidly, and they had to eat. Everyone does. They fed on a cow called Audhumla. This cow, in turn, fed off of a salty ice block, which she licked. After several days of this, the cow steadily uncovered the body of the first god, the first of the Æsir, Buri. Buri found a wife and had some kids, one of which was Odin, who you might have heard of. And Odin didn't like the Jotnar, which is the plural of Jotun. Odin decided that they had to go. He was threatened by how quickly they reproduced. So he and a couple of his buddies got together and ripped Ymir apart. You're about to hear why Odin gets the name Allfather. Odin and the other gods made Midgard out of Ymir. They made the sky dome out of his skull, the clouds out of his brains, the earth out of his skin, the grass and the trees out of his hair, the mountains and the rocks out of his bones, and most importantly, all the water is Ymir's blood. Now this is important because when they tore him apart, the torrent of blood drowned all but two of the other Jotnar. These two escaped, I guess, and went off to reproduce as Jotnar do best. But the important part of that is that the Æsir were left the dominant force in this world that they just created. And that kind of ends our first story. Now, we can go into it later, all the implications of this, and you'll hear many of these figures continue to come up throughout their various stories that we'll talk about. And speaking of stories we'll talk about, I have a list up there, a to-do list for videos, and they include the one we just covered, the foundation of Midgard and the gods and the giants. After this, we'll talk about Yggdrasils, the origin of the world tree. Then we'll talk about the various races, like the dwarves and the elves, the dvergr, the elfr, and then we'll talk about the realms that they all came from or were given, and that's as far as my list goes for right now. But believe me, it will take a long time for me to run out of content. That being said, that's all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching, and have a lovely rest of your day.